Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Wind Against Tide. This is the first of our species-specific specials, Joey. We're talking about a fish that is iconic to us anglers in Victoria and all around Australia, and indeed New Zealand, I'm going to say, the snapper.
I love snapper. They are. I don't think you're Victorian if you own a fishing rod and you haven't caught a snapper.
I would agree with you there, Joe. Arapus trutter, I believe the scientific name is there. There you go. How's that for a bit of knowledge?
Yeah,
Well, I hope that's right.
they are one of my favourite of all time fish to catch. When I started fishing as a kid, I started out fishing with my dad and uncle in a little half cab. We were launching from Patterson River back in the early 90s, and yet everybody was out in their droves catching snapper. We weren't very good at it. For years and years and years, we struggled at catching snapper, but we had to figure out how to get better at catching snapper, and we started speaking to people at tackle shop and going on forums and going to talk nights, and we had to learn. So what we hope to do...
It was a bit different back then too, Joey. No social media where the information was readily available, no YouTube. So there's a lot of reading and, good old-fashioned talk nights and stuff going on, I reckon.
Yeah, that's it. So what we hope to cover in this short little episode is everything that we've learnt about snapper. Dave and I have fished together for the last 10 years, and we have had some success. So we hope to just share with you what we know, and we're going to focus on Westernport snapper because it's where the time that we spent the most time fishing for them. So we hope you enjoy this, and let's get stuck straight into it.
Yeah, 100%, Joey. A quick little backstory for myself as well. Started off fishing for snapper, or actually I was fishing for pinkies in my younger years, and that was great fun. And then I saw a few photos and videos of big snapper, and I thought, how do you catch them? I'd love to catch one. Seemed a bit unattainable. When I was about 13, I had a 12-foot tinny. I mowed it out off cows in Westernport. I anchored in a very unlikely spot. No depth sounder, Joey. Just lined up some rocks and a marker buoy.
That's how they did it back then.
And plopped a bait down. Well, no, most people did have depth sounders, but I was 13 and couldn't afford one. It's not that olden days. I wasn't using catgut for bait and all the ye olden techniques. But plonked down a bait and a rod screamed off Joe. And turned out it was a 4.5 kilo snapper. And from that moment on, I gained quite the love for the species, and we've chased them ever since. And I still get hyped up this time of year as we come into late August and the run of fish really picks up, and I look forward to chasing them. And I know that you do as well, Joe. For many reasons, they fight well, they taste good, they're beautiful looking species. Any other points you can think of on the old snapper?
No, you've covered it beautifully, but I want to just go, where are we at the moment? We're middle of August, just about to click into September. If you're keen on catching a snapper at this time of year, it is a little bit early. The water's a little bit cool, but it isn't impossible to catch a snapper at this time of year.
No, you can catch them all winter if you want, Joe. If you're happy to sit there and freeze your nuts off for the chance of 1 to 2 fish, then you can catch them all winter. There's resident fish that don't leave the bays and estuaries. So we know that the bulk of snapper move in and out of both Westernport and neighbouring Port Phillip every year, but there's certainly some residents that will stay around, and if you sit out in the cold and wait long enough, you're going to get one of them to chew a bait. They're generally good fish as well, but this time of year, as the water starts to tick up in temperature a little bit, you'll see more and more fish come in through the entrances, and you're more likely to encounter a few more of them.
I like what you just said there, resident snapper. I definitely think that is the case this time of year. I don't think that the snapper are being caught. And look, this is just a theory. I don't think the snapper is the new season stock. I think it's very much the resident fish.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a mixture this time of year, Joe. You get some new fish coming in and some of the old residents that have been there all winter. But, like I said, the water temperature comes up in the bay. Offshore, the water temp is probably sitting around 14 at the moment. Yep. In the bay, it'll be just creeping up above that. Mm-hmm. So at the point where the temperature in the bay gets warmer than the temperature outside in the ocean, that's generally when we see the bite improve. So as we move out of August and onwards, the peak of the fishery is generally around November, would you say, Joe?
Yep.
November, December?
Yeah, absolutely. Melbourne Cup long weekend, and probably the week after Melbourne Cup, I would say traditionally.
Yep, 100%. Melbourne Cup's quite famous for being snapper time, isn't it? So we look at those periods as the peak, and make no mistake about it, these fish are in here to get jiggy with it. They're doing a bit of dating in the dark, you might say, Joey. They found their match and they're in here spawning. That's why they all enter these shallow bays and estuaries.
Yep.
And that's why they're here en masse, and the fishing can be extremely good. So in Westernport, we see that peak, and then it'll start to drop off as we move into mid to late December. Depending on the year and the water temps and the rain and stuff, that's generally when it'll start to quieten down again. And then it's not that they're gone and there's no fish anymore, but maybe we start to turn our attention to other things. Boat traffic dies off, and then that's it for another year, Joe.
So, Dave, look, I'm going to ask, it's a two-part question here. Sounding for snapper. If you wanted to catch a snapper right now, how much would you subscribe to seeing what's on your fish finder as opposed to maybe right in the middle of that getting jiggy with it season, so to speak?
I really think depth sounders are a useful tool. We look at our neighbours over there in Port Phillip, and extremely important, I think, being able to sound that snapper.
Totally your eyes under the water.
Definitely. Less structure in Port Phillip. Well, less natural structure anyway.
You can be, this is why I like Westernport, opposed to Port Phillip Bay. You could be fishing in the same spot all day in Port Phillip and not turn a reel. Westernport being a little bit more tidal. If you pick a good interception location, being a channel edge, there's a chance that the tide might bring a fish to you.
100%. And the other good thing about Westernport, Joey, is the bycatch.
Yes.
Whiting, even maybe a mulloway.
Yep, 100% in the springtime.
I wouldn't guarantee that, but generally it is that time of year. There's always a few incidental big fish, big Jews that turn up. But anyway, we're there for the big snapper, Joey. And getting back to your question.
Yep, sounders.
Sounding great for establishing fisher in an area, but do I think that I'm necessarily catching the fish that I've sounded? Probably not. So these fish, in my opinion, are moving along grazing through Westernport, using channel edges to navigate and making their way up onto the tidal mudflats to scrounge around and eat stuff like, shellfish, crabs, some of their favourite diet, and then they're coming back off the mudflats again, and that's where you can generally find them using the interception method, Joey. So like you kind of alluded to before, when I'm fishing this time of year, I like to go out and fish an entire tidal movement. So we have 6-hour tides in Westernport. Tide rushes in, 6 hours, tide rushes out. And there's a tide change in the middle somewhere.
Slack water in the middle. Yep.
Which generally is not very conducive to actually catching fish right on the tide change, is it? We want a little bit of go, a little bit of flow, because they say no go, no flow, no go. Geez, I got that out eventually.
Well, look, I think it's a lot with the flow that we look for as the it puts a scent of the bait down the tide, and definitely like a little bit of a burley trail, I reckon.
I think just that tidal movement just seems to increase the activity of the bait, the things that the snapper feed on, and the snapper, and just seems to bring everything to life. I don't know, that's my theory anyway. Or actually thinking out loud here, it's probably more that on that tidal movement, the fish are moving up and down the channels, and then they're coming across our baits.
Yep, absolutely.
So, long story short, sounding great to find fish in the area, but I really do like to position myself along a piece of structure or a channel edge, and I'm letting the fish come past me, and I'm sort of predicting where I think the fish might be going at that time of day. So if I can pick like a time of day, just for an example, say I've got a flood tide, Joe, and we're coming into an evening. So in my mind, those fish want to get up on those vast mudflats of Westernport and feed overnight.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to put my boat in a channel just back from there that's going to feed into that area and get the fish as they come past, and they're hopefully funneling down that channel. and then I just have nice, beautiful, fresh baits out, and I sit there and wait, and I'll sit there that whole tide. I try not to move because obviously you're moving around, you could potentially miss the fish.
And then, would you do the opposite of that when the tide is flowing out? You position the boat in, say, a different area on the outgoing tide?
Yeah, it's funny. Some people have like a preferred direction of tide this time of year, but I do think it's just trial and error. Some spots fish better on one direction of the tide and some fish better on the other, or it could just be a confidence thing. But it's just trial and error. And one thing I will say, above all, Joe, it's time on water. So you
Definitely
can try and,
this time of year.
you can try and pick out all the perfect conditions, but if you don't have baits in the water soaking for a significant amount of time, you're probably going to struggle. You can't catch them at home, as they say, Joey.
Can't catch them sitting on the couch.
Now, as we move into the season proper, we get really defined bite times. You can sort of, if you're on the ball, you can track them day after day. You'll see patterns emerge, and even year after year. So keeping a diary is a good thing. And the fish are, they're pretty predictable in that they'll be in the same areas at the same times a year, and you'll be able to keep revisiting.
It becomes like clockwork, and quite often when we're, hard into our snapper campaign, we talk about being, having your finger on the pulse and knowing when that clock's going to tick, like when are the fish switched on and when are they switched off.
Exactly. And if you're lucky enough to get out a few times a week, you can literally track in which part of the port the fish are in and just keep sort of following them along, and you're on the pulse. That's not us these days, Joey. We get to fish barely ever, so keeping a diary can help you land on where the fish have been in previous years, and you'll find that they'll keep revisiting those areas, I reckon.
That's good. Dave, tell me what would be your favourite bait for snapper? Look, can be this time of year, can be middle of the season. Tell me what you like the best.
So everyone knows in Westernport, calamari is king, Joey. You love eating them.
I do.
You haven't worked out how to make them tender. But you still love eating them.
Yep.
Fresh calamari, you cannot beat it. But do not discount the old oily pilchards and fish baits either, Joe. So I've got to say, I do rate calamari probably the highest. But
Why though? I hear like it's just so much better than everything else. Like there's got to be a why about it.
well, it's consistent. Sometimes it's really strange. I would always try and have at least one like fleshy bait like salmon, pilchard, slimy mackerel, etc. out, because for some unknown reason, some days the fish do switch onto that, but more often than not, it's calamari is the go. And I just think they must just find it absolutely delicious like we do, Joe. But one thing I will say is oily baits will almost always attract a big flat ray in Westernport, which is a surefire way to ruin your fishing. When you're dealing with those giant skates and eagle rays, your baits aren't in the water waiting to catch snapper.
No, they're not. That's time out of the water.
So basically anything that's reasonably fresh, good quality, but absolutely love calamari, to answer that question, Joey.
Yeah, I love some of the oily baits as well. Definitely remember particular time I was fishing off Joe's Island maybe 6 or 7 years ago.
Off your own island?
Yes, off my own island.
Amazing.
And caught a 3.5 kilo snapper on mackerel fillet. So, yeah, that was back in the day when I used to buy bait from the Springvale fish market. Thought going to the local fishmonger and buying a couple of oily fish like yakka and mackerel would be good. And, yeah, caught it on a fillet of mackerel. So
it's funny, Joe. I had a session last year. I had all fresh squid out. I didn't even bring anything else with me, which I often do. I get a bit blindsided. One-eyed, that's it. With the calamari at times, and I had a full set of that out. Couldn't turn a reel. And in Westernport, every now and then you'll get like a salmon will eat your snapper rig bait. So that happened. I'm like, well, fresh is best. I'm going to put some of that out. Almost as soon as that hit the water, rod screamed off, snapper.
Wow.
Put another chunk of salmon out, rod screamed off, snapper. And it was just fish after fish, only on the salmon wouldn't touch the calamari.
Wow.
Why that is, I do not know. They were just keyed in on that particular bait that particular day. And if I may ramble a little bit more, there was a tea tree several years ago where Brendan and I fish. Every snapper we caught, Joe, was on King George whiting.
Oh, I've been wanting to have a session like that. I've heard about the King George whiting being absolutely legendary. I can't, apart from being in Port Phillip, obviously, and silver whiting's one of the gun baits for the biggest snapper in Port Phillip. I can't say personally I've had an amazing session on the scraps of King George whiting heads.
Oh, it wasn't scraps. It was the good bits. The meaty fillets.
No, are you serious?
It was. So what happened was we were fishing. It was a tea tree competition, which is a famous snapper competition here in Victoria. We were fishing right in the upper reaches of Westernport where there's a lot of whiting around.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, we thought, well, King George whiting's going to be good here. This is where they feed, what they're going to be eating.
Pretty clever.
And we fished King George whiting, and we caught like 25 snapper in a tide up to 7.5 kilo.
Wow.
It was nuts. Every bait we put out was just getting nailed. But having said that, Joe, I've fished King George whiting many times since, and a lot of the time a ray will eat it.
Shit.
So what do we get from that? Fresh bait, try and put out what they're going to be eating, and vary it a little bit until you find out what's working on the day. So I'll generally have, 2 to 3 squid baits out and 1 or 2 fish baits, and then if one's working better than the other, I'll change it up a little bit.
That seems like a really intelligent spread to run. But Dave, do you subscribe much to paying attention to the current moon phase and what the barometric pressure is doing when it comes to snapper fishing?
Look,
or
Joe,
do you think that they're only small sort of factors in the whole sort of grand picture of things?
Look, they might not be small, but I don't get to go fishing enough to be worrying about what the moon and the barometer's doing enough for it to stop me going. But look, the theory, and it does prove true quite frequently, so I guess it's not really a theory, is that the barometric pressure, for whatever reason, and the wives' tale is that when the barometric pressure is low, the snapper don't feed, something to do with their stomachs and the air pressure. But when the barometric pressure is rising, it triggers a bite period, which it does, but that's not to say that you're not going to catch fish at any other stage of the day or with any other pattern.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, a rising barometer from about, say, 1,010 up to 1,025 on a steep rise is going to trigger a good bite normally, Joe.
I say 10, 20, plenty.
Do they?
Yeah.
Do they really?
10, 20, plenty. Absolutely. So barometric pressure of 1,020, 10, 20 equals plenty.
You just taught me that. I will say, I would put it this way, Joe. I like a moving barometer. So even if it's dropping.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought that was like the worst time.
So sometimes you'll get a barometer rise, right? And then it sits stable at like 1,025 for like 4 or 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
That, to me, sometimes can slow the bite. So if you've had a low barometric pressure and it shoots up, it's like they go on a bit of a feeding frenzy. And then they've eaten, they're full. So as it steadies, there's no rush for them to be feeding anymore. They're already eaten. Their metabolism slows and they don't feed a little bit until it starts to move again, and then that triggers them into a bit more of a frenzy again.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so that's my theory with it, and it does seem to work. But then, like I said, it's not gonna. If it's a low barometer, I'm not gonna go. I'm not going fishing because you never know. Sometimes if there's a low barometer or a crap bite period, maybe the small fish won't feed, but maybe big mama will.
Well, I tend, just based off what you were just saying there, I feel like time on the water, you have to go. And I think if things like the barometric phase is good, or the moon phase is good, generally leading up to the full moon is good. I think those are like your kind of bonus points, but I think you definitely have to consistently go if you want to be rewarded at snapper fishing.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Bonus points.
Bonus points. I think those things are. I think the main thing is the location. Being those channel edges, those interception points, and also having having either calamari or an oily fish bait out. And I reckon the other things are bonus points.
I don't mind a full moon at night because the fish tend to feed under the moonlight. But I also don't like night fishing this time of year because it's very cold.
Oh, freezing.
But we've had some cracking sessions under a full moon at night when the snapper are going, Joey.
I think we're going to organise for this year to actually go fishing on our friend's 51-footer. How do you guys like to see that? Get fishing on a 51-footer for snapper fishing in Westernport. I reckon we'd film up a storm there, Dave.
It does sound delightfully comfortable, Joe, and I do like comfort these days. So I do look forward to that.
Yeah.
So, moonrise also, Joe. When the moon's coming up, that'll trigger a bite sometimes. You know that?
Yeah.
Very good bite.
Just like Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Yes.
Bad Moon Rising.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I was getting at. Yeah. Yeah. No. So various factors. Just keep an eye on it and take note. And if it works and you smash fish on that particular period, then you might be onto a bit of a pattern and you can repeat it again in the future.
What rods and reels do you like to use for targeting snapper? How do you be best equipped?
All right. Well, we're talking Westernport specific, aren't we, Joe?
Yeah. For the purpose of this podcast, yes.
Yes. So I feel like I've come back a little bit on the rod weight because I just hate fighting snapper on stupidly heavy gear.
I feel like we used to fish really, really heavy for years, and I think that if I take a step back, the methodology behind that was, okay, if you get a big stingray or eagle ray, you want to quickly be able to dispatch that fish and quickly get your line rebaited and back in the water. But I definitely feel like the fishing gear's gotten more intelligent. It's stronger and lighter these days. What would you say to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other reason we used to fish really heavy is we do a lot of deep water, fast flowing water, gummy shark fishing and stuff with the same setups. And we'd be hurling, 20 ounce plus weights into the ocean. So just to cast that weight, you need a pretty heavy rod. And then obviously to deal with all the bycatch, you need a pretty heavy rod. But probably most of our snapper fishing these days is in 14 meters or shallower. And you can definitely run a lighter setup. You're using probably a maximum of 10 to 12 ounces and you get a really enjoyable fight that way. So at the moment, I'm running 10,000 size Saragosas just because of their versatility, because I can use them on stuff like school tuna trolling and whatnot. But I'm running them on like a 10 kilo. My rods are called a Snapper Classics by Shimano. You won't find them again. They were a lofty bargain bin run out rod. And I've had so many people ask me where to get them. They're bloody grouse. They were cheap as chips and they're really nice rod to catch a fish on. They're not too heavy. They're not too light. They can deal with bycatch, but they are also enjoyable to fight a fish on, Joe. But absolutely, I'd have no issue fighting snapper or fishing for snapper on, say, a 6,000 size rod paired with, a 6 to 8 kilo rod.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with that. Like, when we buy fishing gear as well, sometimes we try to select the reel where, we're going to get the most versatility out of it, that we can catch multiple species on. But, I'm speaking to some snapper aficionados at the minute that don't really care about a reel to catch a tuna or catch a kingfish on or whatnot. And I'm hearing a lot of blokes sort of using around that 8,000 size reel and a rod to sort of match to fish Westernport at the moment, being a really enjoyable experience.
100%. Now, mainline for me, Joey, I like braid in Westernport. It's less stretch. You need less weight. It's nothing like feeling the head shakes of a big fish through that braided line. And obviously it's really strong for its diameter. So I run 30 pound and I run a leader I'll run a shock leader, I should say. So like a wind-on type leader of 40 or 60 pound, about 4 meters of that. And then I'll run a 1.2 meter-ish leader, which is 60 pound.
And nowadays, what knot are you using to connect your braided line to your shock leader?
Oh, I use an Albright knot. So a Bimini twist to an Albright knot, Joe.
Okay.
The only reason I do that...
Do you think a Bimini's a bit of an overkill?
Well, maybe. We're fighting some big fish on that gear.
That's true.
40 kilo mulloway and stuff.
Yeah, okay.
You don't want to have any chances. Leave it to chance. Now, the only reason I do that, funnily enough, is obviously an FG knot's going to be super strong, but you know the sliding sinker rigs that we use?
Yes.
The easy slider.
Yeah, the easy rig. Yep.
The easy rig. I've seen many times the easy rig goes over the knot of an FG and gets stuck on the other side, and
Really?
you wind a fish in, and you can only wind it up to the top of the shock leader, and you've got a snapper with 4 meters of shock leader swimming around under the boat. You've got a hand line it in. I've seen it happen before. So that's why part of the reason I like the Albright and the Bimini.
Slimline.
Yes. What?
It's slimline. Like, so I mean, like the easy rig can run through it.
No, it's actually got a knot that stops the easy rig from going past the shock leader.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
So that it can't get stuck up the line.
Okay.
Yes. That's why I do it that way.
Right.
But anyway, each their own. So a good strong connecting knot to a shock leader. And then we go, obviously, as we've just discussed, we run a running sinker
Mm-hmm.
and then a swivel. And then we run about 1.5 meters of bite leader in 60 pound. I find that a good weight. 40 pound, good, but have occasionally been bitten off. 60 pounds a pretty sure bet.
60's good.
They're not super leader shy in Westernport either, I find. So happily go 60 pound. And then the other contentious point is, do you go a circle hook or a suicide? What do you prefer, Joe?
I really enjoy the twin suicide hook rig. A pair of 4-0s or a pair of 5-0s. I really enjoy that. I think you'll sometimes you get these big snapper that they tend to rip and shake the bait. I think you got the better chance of getting one that way. But look, I do like circle hooks as well, because if a fish does actually swallow a circle hook, that might take a lot longer for the fish to hook itself. But when that rod loads, there's a pretty good chance it's not coming off.
Yeah, it's a tough one. A lot of the time early season we tend to run the suicides and really strike the hook in there when the fish aren't properly engulfing the bait and taking off with it. But I think I'm turning more and more to circle hooks these days. Obviously, if you want to release a fish, it's a lot better option because they're just hooked in the corner of the jaw. But I also find that when snapper do that massive erratic head shaking run that they do, with a circle hook, it's a lot harder for them to throw it, especially once it's already locked in the hinge of the jaw.
Yeah, well, it's not coming out when it gets to that point.
With those twin suicides, every now and then they can sort of like bounce them out. If they're not really well set, they'll kind of shake them loose. I think either way, you're not going to land every single fish. They're good at throwing hooks, but
Yeah, they got a hard, bony mouth.
yeah, they do have a hard bony mouth. But I think circle hooks, for my mind, I'm a fan of them, Joe. So good for releasing, good hook sets. And the other thing is, if you're retiring a lot of rigs, a lot easier just to tie a single circle on. One thing I will say with circles is you really want a nice compact bait, Joe, so that the fish can get the whole bait into its mouth, and then it lets the hook do its job.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've seen some interesting bait presentations from you guys over the years. You've got a few different ways you do your calamaris. First, it was the ring. Then you can do strips. Then you can do the ring with my dad. My dad makes me laugh. He calls it the little trailer.
Yep.
You're attaching a trailer to your ring. And when I think trailer, I think like, he goes and collects firewood, like he's just clipping on a 6x4 at the back of his car. So yeah, attaching a little trailer to your squid ring, Davey.
Sometimes I call that the lice anode, that strip that goes off the back of the squid ring, because the lice eat that before they get to the main bait. But yeah, I'll put a tentacle or a strip off the back of a squid ring often, and the ring actually swims in the water, believe it or not, and then it makes the trailing tentacle swim along as well. It's pretty cool.
Definitely, it's like a wiggle, a paddle tail soft plastic.
Yeah, definitely. So you get that visual representation and the smell.
Because there's current pushing past that bait, so yeah.
Yeah. Cut baits are really good for snapper. They are a predator, but they are also very good at scavenging out food off the bottom. So something that's cut, has a lot of scent, it's easy for them to eat, works really well, Joe. So yeah, that's how I'd present it, and that's the tackle I'd present it on. I want to touch a little bit quickly before we finish up here. Eating a snapper, I hear a lot of people go, snapper are crap eating.
I've heard that too.
Straight
Heaps
up
over the years. Yep.
Straight up, they're full of shit. I see so many snapper, not bled, not brain spiked, just thrown in a tub on a boat, and then people fill them. They're warm, they're mushy, it's shit. I mean, of course, that's going to be the case. We've seen a movement with bluefin tuna called Tuna Champions where everyone's taking great care of their catch. And I promise you, if you do that with snapper, the same things, you're going to find the same thing. The eating quality is going to improve dramatically and you're going to really enjoy it. So we land a snapper, Joe. First thing we do is we brain spike it. So fish, gone, dead, out of it.
So brain spiking it, like I've seen you guys do it many, many times. It's like there's like a little soft, bit like, a temple, where we've got our temple here as a human, but you find the soft area that's above the eye and a very sharp blade to
Here it is, Joe.
spike its brain, which it instantly...
Watch this.
Yep, there we go.
It's on the screen for you.
There, so...
Spike. So that's the first thing we do. Brain spike.
Yep.
That relaxes the fish.
Relaxes the muscle.
Yep. Then we bleed it. And then we put it straight in an ice slurry to cool it down. And if you really want to go that step further, which would probably improve the flesh even more, you'd gut it.
Yep, agreed.
So then it stays on ice. Generally, it's, I think, beneficial to leave it on ice for a day after you've gone fishing because it firms the fillets right up.
Mm-hmm.
And then fillet it or eat it whole, whatever you want to do. You'll find that the flesh is really firm and really white. And it's delicious.
Snow white.
Really versatile. Tasty.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, love it. And
so it grinds my gears when people say they're shit eating, Joe.
I agree with that. No, they're very, very good when they're looked after. 100%.
Well, for our mini species specific series, Joe, maybe the first of many, we could go on about snapper all day, but I think we've covered a fair bit of it there.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of positive to take out of that, and yeah, I hope you guys all enjoyed that. We're gonna keep rolling out those little mini series for you, and share with you everything that we've picked up overfishing for the rest of our lives. Sorry, from
our whole lives.
From our whole lives. Sorry,
we're sharing with you for the rest of our lives.
Oh, that could take some time.
Nah, but yeah, we love snapper. So to sum up, time on water, basically, Joey. Fresh baits, time on water, persistence, good gear, good times.
Get your boat serviced as well because it's in the middle of winter and I've heard it's a long wait to get your boat serviced. So get that ready as well.
Beautiful. All right, have a good night. Oh, actually, you're probably all not listening to this at night time anymore. We're not live streaming these days.
You might be on the work site. You might be,
yes. Have a good day, everyone.
Might be on Smoko, punching out a dart.
Enjoy whatever you're up to. See you on the water. Hope you have a blinder. Catch you next time.